Hi guys, welcome to my channel. This is the second part of the step-by-step tutorial where I'm demonstrating how to create several color and tonal gradients using watercolor. I focus on wet technique in particular, and also in this video I demonstrate how to use dry brush effects and washing out techniques in purpose creating some extra texture, and I'm drawing this purple gemstone. My name is Irina Kay and I'm an artist and art educator. And if you would like to draw this gemstone with me and follow my step-by-step instructions, you can download a reference for this purple gemstone if you click on the link which I included in the description under the video. And now let's continue to work on the gemstone. I'm working on the next surface, which is quite big and quite light, so it shouldn't be very difficult for you to create a gradient in this area. So I started to cover it with a lighter purple color, and I'm covering the rest of the surface with clean water, creating the gradient with that color that I applied first. And while the surface is still wet, I'm adding very close to the edge more intense purplish color. It's less liquid, so it's not spreading so much, and because it's so close to the border and color is so dark, I want to make sure that I will create a proper outline, and I'm using the small brush. If you watched the first part of tutorial, you probably remember that there are several ways to create gradients using wet techniques, and in this particular moment I'm using one when I'm not covering the full surface but combining together wet areas that I'm creating with the brush, adding a slightly bigger amount of paint so the paint can spread over that surface that's still a little bit wet. That fragment contains also some interesting texture. I kind of like these imperfections that I could see on the surface, and I would like to add also some scratches using drier brush strokes. You don't have to add these extra details if you're afraid to spoil your beautiful gradient, but I would still try to encourage you to do that. Just make sure that you try it first color, that it's not that dark, because it shouldn't create a very huge contrast on that side of the stone. Try to make your brush slightly drier, use some small amount of paint, and make your brush slightly drier using paper towel. Also pay attention on the directions of the brush strokes, because that will help you imitate that particular scratches. Now I would love to focus on the central part of this gemstone. There is a gradient with a combination of colors and texture. The lower part of this fragment is a little bit less detailed. There are less different colors combined in one gradient. I started coloring it with light pink using big size brush, and then I'm changing for a smaller size brush that has a sharper tip, that it's more convenient for me to create a little bit of gradient there at the bottom. And I'm covering then again the upper part all with one brighter, slightly more intense purple color. And because the lower part is still slightly wet, so the colors on the upper part and the lower part are combining quite softly together. As my gradient is pretty wet, I have a couple of minutes to work on extra gradient on other side. And I'm covering that small fragment with lighter pink color and then adding slight amount of blue color, almost with a dry brush, and then merging it together with a small size brush. Now I'm going back to the main purple gradient, and as I see the surface is slightly dry but still wet, I'm adding next brighter and more intense color one on one, and then on the top of it I'm adding some darker blue because both purple and blue more intense and less liquid. The paint is not spreading too much, so I can control the amount of paint and how it's spreading a little bit better because the gradient, the surface of the paper is getting slightly drier. Now I'm adding a couple of dry brush strokes on the gradient that I worked previously and moving on the bottom of main fragment, and I work again with dry brush, creating texture, this kind of scratches on the surface. Make sure that the brush is not too dry. I'm using extra paper to make brush slightly drier and also to shape the brush that direction that I want to create this kind of scratches. Now it's time for washing out effects. As you might notice on the reference that the border between two surfaces is not so perfect. They're kind of scratches or something that is making it not that straight. So I'm using flat brush. The brush shouldn't be too soft. The best brush would be with a straight edge of bristles at the tip because it makes much easier for you to see direction that you're washing out and pressing on that brush. As you might notice that I'm moving brush slightly there and back to remove some amount of paint that you already have on the surface. What also helps to use a dry paper towel. Just make sure that the rest of the gradient already got dry and you will not remove with a paper towel any extra paint that is still wet. Meanwhile, I started to paint the very top of the gemstone with more concentrated paint. It's not that liquid because I need to cover basically quite small fragment of the gemstone, and then I'm adding a little bit of lighter paint, similar color to continue with the gradient. I'm covering almost the last parts of the gradients that I didn't complete it yet, and you might notice that I like to use more wet gradient technique when I'm applying one paint, one color close to another one. It takes some experience to start to feel more comfortable using this technique, but I also feel that it's a little bit quicker and I have control of the color that I will see after paint will get dry because it's not mixing with the water on the first layer if I created it with light paint or with clean water. But it takes, again, it takes some time to start to feel comfortable and get some experience while you're working with wet techniques and creating gradients. If you try to draw the same gemstone or you try just to work on gradients somehow separately using those instructions that I demonstrated you, that will be great if you can share which of the exact techniques works the best for you when you first cover with the water, when you first cover with paint, or when you just apply paint close to each other and mixing it slightly with the brush on the top. So that will be interesting for me, guys, to know which of the effects works the best for you. As you might notice, guys, that during the video, basically through the both parts of tutorial, I didn't add any extra paint to my palette because I mixed all colors in at once as it was in the very beginning of the first part. And it was really helpful for me because I didn't need to stop in the middle of the process and realize that my gradient got dry. So it's really helpful to prepare all paint, all colors in advance, mix quite big amount. That will be enough for you to work over the whole artwork without any interruptions to the process. Now I'm adding some dry brush strokes to the surface with already darker paint as I started with lighter, you might notice. And it's much easier to add those details closer to the end of the work, or maybe as a last step, because you already see the whole piece that you created. You know, if you need to add somewhere any extra details, if you want to add some more contrast on some part of the gemstone. So I would recommend to add some smaller details, especially when they're darker, closer to the end of the process. The last gradient, I'm working starting with the darker paint, then changing the brush for lighter purple, and then changing the brush again for the darker color. Remember that I mentioned that it's easier when you work with several brushes and you can change them during the process. Depends on how big the surface that you're covering, and also you don't have to spend much time to clean them properly, so it's very handy to have brushes for darker and lighter tones. And I'm adding some, again, a more concentrated paint over the gradient that I created. I don't want to see those lines more like a dry brush strokes, because the gradient is still slightly wet, so the lines are slightly softer because they are also part of that gradient. And I continue to work with a dry brush, adding a little bit more of texture on the areas where I would like to have it. When I completed all gradients, I can evaluate the whole piece that I created and decide if I want to add any extra contrast or any more details to my gemstone. For example, I noticed that I want to make a little bit more contrast on the bottom of the fragment, and to remove some amount of paint, making it a little bit lighter, more transparent part of the gemstone. So I'm washing out again with a flat brush, slightly removing dry paint. With the small sized brush, I'm adding a little bit of shade under that lighter part that I where I just removed paint. And now I'm continuing to work with a dry brush to create some brush strokes and add some extra scratches. As you might notice that I'm using quite light colors to making it not that contrast. And also I'm trying to shape my brush to make brush strokes in that direction that helping me. It is also important not to overwork your piece, and in this case I'm trying to focus on adding more details on the main area of the gemstone. As you notice, though, I am not working at the bottom, for example, anymore. So I'm using flat brush, clean and slightly wet, to wash out a couple of scratches on the main surface of the gemstone. Now let's take a look and appreciate all that careful work that we have done working on this purple gemstone. Again, I would like to encourage you to download reference, try to draw with me step by step using this tutorial. Also, I will be happy to see your results, and if you're ready to share, please post it on Instagram and tag me or DM me. My Instagram account is irinak.fashion. And if you guys found this video useful and informative, please don't forget to like this video. It will help others to find valuable information, and it also will encourage me to create more creative content and share with you. Subscribe to my channel to stay updated on the new videos, and thank you for watching, guys, and have an artful day.